there are these, I think now, like, I don't know, 130 countries have done this recognition of a so-called Palestinian state, and the corporate media and all of these pundits and people involved with the Palestinian Authority, of course, are touting it as, this major milestone, a political victory for Palestinians. Um, what is at the core here? How are we to understand and analyze what these recognitions mean and what they are in place of politically?
Yeah, I have a lot to say about this
Yeah.
actually, but maybe Asa, why don't you just to bring people up to date, why don't you take us through some of the media you've put together, and then we'll talk about it because I do
Great.
have thoughts about this for sure.
I can't wait.
Yeah, sure. Well, of course, I mean, I think most of our viewers will know that several states this week announced that they were recognizing the Palestinian Authority as the state of Palestine. So, it's not anything really new in there's lots of states around the world that already recognize the Palestinian Authority as the state of Palestine, but it was new in the sense of the states that did it. So some of Israel's most adamant allies have recognized now the Palestinian Authority as the so-called state of Palestine. So first of all, there was Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of Britain, and he declared in this in a speech that was posted to Twitter I mean, I think we'll spare you the actual speech.
Thank you for that.
It was quite boring. Basically there was a lot of condemnation of Palestinian resistance, demanding that the so-called hostages are returned, and so on and so forth. And then at the end, he said that we recognise the state of Palestine. That was in essence what he said, and of course we know Keir Starmer is one of Israel's most adamant allies. Infamously, at the start of the genocide, said that Israel has that right to deprive, to besiege the Gaza Strip, to deprive Palestinians of water, electricity, petrol, and so forth. Yeah. Secondly,
What are some of the conditions that he placed on the recognition, though, Asa? You mentioned, I mean, and they all, we can talk about Keir Starmer, but it was all coordinated. So France, Australia, Canada, the UK, and a few others, they all said the same things. They all, it's, yeah, I guess we can.
yeah, it's conditional recognition on releasing the hostages, essentially, as they put it, which are as
And Hamas can have no role in the future Palestinian state,
Which
yeah.
has to be
and
disarmed. Yeah.
has to be disarmed.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so one wonders what are they recognizing? I mean, we associate recognition with an independent state, but if Emmanuel Macron and Prime Minister Anthony Albanese of Australia and Keir Starmer and Mark Carney of Canada get to decide who can actually govern the state, then it's not independent and you're not recognizing anything.
Plus, like, geographically, show us a map of this so-called state of Palestine.
Yeah, it's the West Bank and Gaza
It's not
Strip.
even all the West Bank. It's archipelago West Bank,
Well, I
right?
mean, Britain, for example,
Yeah.
had a map. I haven't put. Maybe I should have put this in
Yeah.
the
Where
doc.
there's a
But
whole section missing
the map
between
is,
North and South. Yeah.
they changed it to from West Bank Palestinian territories to Palestine. So it's this kind of surface level recognition, and not recognizing the reality of the fact of what the West Bank is.
Yeah.
That it's these, as you said, this archipelago of disconnected, surrounded territories, which are just completely besieged on a day-to-day basis. We
Right.
talk to our colleagues and friends in the West Bank, and that's the reality. It's impossible or near impossible for Palestinians to freely travel between their
Yeah, there's 900
between.
checkpoints right now.
Yeah,
Why don't
exactly.
we look at the statement issued by the Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and the Foreign Minister Penny Wong? And this again is typical. So you can apply this to Canada, the UK, France, to all of them. But I think the Australian one really makes the point. So they say, effective today, the 21st of September, Australia formally recognizes the independent and sovereign state of Palestine. So let's see what that means, independent and sovereign. So in doing so, Australia recognizes the legitimate and long-held aspirations of the people of Palestine to a state of their own. Now, what's missing from that sentence? Doesn't use the word rights, aspirations. An aspiration is a wish. So there's no recognition of any Palestinian rights here. It's an aspiration. So no recognition of Palestinian rights, which a fundamental one being the right of return. So Australia's recognition of Palestine today, alongside Canada, the UK, etc., is part of a coordinated international effort to build new momentum for a two-state solution. So that's an admission. The first sentence says, we're recognizing an independent sovereign state. And by the time we get to the third sentence, we're told there is no such thing. It's just a PR effort to build momentum. So this is corporate jargon. And then they say that starting with the ceasefire in Gaza and the release of the hostages taken in the atrocities of October 7, 2023. So this is a restatement of Israel's lies and atrocity propaganda about October 7th. And of course, the so-called hostages who are still there, as John just told us, are prisoners of war, soldiers.
Yeah,
People,
I mean, this is a really important point that, they called them hostages, but actually they are prisoners of war. These are all soldiers.
Yeah. So it's they say ceasefire in Gaza. They don't use the word genocide, and we'll talk more about that later. Then they say this is part of Australia's long-standing commitment to a two-state solution, which has always been the only path to enduring peace. This is, of course, to try to rewrite history. It is not, and to limit, again, any political possibility to this so-called two-state solution. Why is it the only possible path? Why isn't abolishing this racist, genocidal, colonial entity a path to peace, just as racist, genocidal, apartheid South Africa was abolished and replaced with a democratic state? That would be a path to peace, but we're not allowed to talk about that because, as we'll see more in the statement, the commitment is to Zionism and Jewish and colonial supremacy, not to anything to do with Palestinian rights. Then they say here, the president of the Palestinian Authority. Wait, that's odd. Didn't you in the first sentence just recognize the independent and sovereign state of Palestine? And now we're still talking about the president of the Palestinian Authority. So what? So the first sentence, what did we recognize an independent sovereign state, but now we're talking about the president of the Palestinian Authority. So they've already withdrawn whatever recognition was there. Has restated its recognition of Israel's right to exist. Wow. The first mention of rights, and it's not Palestinians' rights. So this is not a statement recognizing Palestinian right to self-determination and statehood and existence. This is a declaration by the government of Australia of Israel's right to independence and sovereignty and existence, so-called, of course, Israel. There is no such thing in international law of a state having a right to exist. The only thing there is in international law is that people have self-determination. I've made this point before many times. East Germany has no right to exist. It's been abolished because Germany the people decided to abolish East Germany and reestablish, I should say, I'm trying not to say a greater Reich, but I mean, that's what it is. Right?
That was their choice.
Yeah. So South Vietnam has no right to exist. Who's going to go and fight for South Vietnam's right to exist? There's no such thing. Doesn't exist. Peoples have a right to self-determination. Israel has no right to exist, nor does any other state. So again, the president of the Palestinian non-state has restated the right of Israel to exist, including commitments to hold democratic elections and enact significant reform to finance, governance, and education. And these are code words that go back decades into the Oslo process, which are classic colonial ruses. Because what are we talking about here? The colonial idea, the British colonial idea, as well as other, is that, oh yes, we're going to eventually give these colonies independence when they're ready. But they're not ready now. They're children.
Yeah.
We are the adults. So until they learn self-governance, which we have to rule them. And that's the modern version of that. So they have to have all these reform. And education here is the code word for changing the Palestinian curriculum and making it a Zionist pro-Israeli curriculum, which has been the agenda for decades and decades.
Yeah.
And
Then we go on. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
well, actually, I wanted to make a point about Mahmoud Abbas, but maybe you should finish the letter.
Yeah, I mean, we're almost at the end of it. I just want to go through. So then they say the terrorist organization Hamas must have no role in Palestine. Wait, we just recognized the independent and sovereign state of Palestine.
With
And here's the
elections.
Prime Minister of Australia telling the people of the supposedly independent and sovereign state of Palestine who isn't allowed to rule them, and defining the party that won the last relatively free election in part of Palestine, the West Bank and Gaza Strip, as a terrorist organization. So who gave the Prime Minister of Australia the right to do that and the chutzpah to do it in what purports to be a recognition of Palestinian sovereignty and independence?
Yeah.
And then they say, crucial work is underway across the international community, which means the countries that support Israel and are working with Israel to complete the genocide, to develop a credible peace plan that enables the reconstruction of Gaza. The reconstruction of Gaza, they're talking as if they're proceeding from the point at which the genocide has been completed. So there's nothing in here about stopping the genocide, stopping the murders, the massacres. There's been no mention of the mass murder at this point of what is almost certainly hundreds of thousands of people. That's not mentioned. It's not there. This is outrageous. This is vile. It's absolutely vile.
Yeah,
and then
and
they
it's
say
still
the
ongoing.
leadership of the countries of the Arab League and the United States, Donald Trump, Steve Witkoff, Mark Rubio, maybe Kamala Harris and Pete Buttigieg, is vital to this task. And the Arab tyrants who are doing business with Israel and who are shielding Israel and who are shooting down attempts to halt the genocide, allowing Israel to fly through their skies to bomb our other Arab countries, then they say Australia will continue to work with our international partners to help build on today's act of recognition. Now, again, if you read the statement from Mark Carney, the Australian Prime Minister, from Keir Starmer, it's all the same garbage. And what I want to say to people is, don't fall for this for a second. This isn't a step forward. I've had people telling me, oh, but it's a step forward. No, it's not. This is an effort to define Palestinians out of to define Palestinian rights out of existence. Notice again, I emphasize this, the only mention of rights in this statement was Israeli rights, so-called Israeli rights. No mention of self-determination, no mention of the right of return, no mention of the right of Palestinian victims of genocide to justice, to restitution. No mention of accountability for the genocide that Australia, Canada, Britain, France, Portugal, Italy, Greece, Germany, not take Germany out because they're not involved in this recognition. All the other countries that are still involved in this genocide, in murdering, mass murdering the people of this allegedly independent and sovereign state, that all of these countries who are complicit in this ongoing genocide have not recognized any Palestinian rights. None. What they want to do is take a concentration camp and put a sign on it that says State of Palestine. And if anyone falls for this, you know, I don't know what more we can say at this point, more than 30 years after the so-called Oslo Accords. This is just an attempt to revive that in the middle of a Holocaust.
And these are the very same countries that allowed the West Bank to be turned into a bunch of Bantustans that can never be a state because they're surrounded by a wall, because the settlement enterprise quadrupled under their Oslo fantasies. They're the ones who allowed this to happen, that didn't speak up when the West Bank was being turned into something that could not be a state. So I just find that part really rich. The elections part is really rich too, because the reason why there's not been elections is because of Mahmoud Abbas. And it's because of the international community that blocked elections because, wait for it, because they were going to lose. Every time they're going to lose. And the first time when Hamas won the election, all of these countries, they thought Abbas was going to win the elections. That's how little they understood about Palestine. And Condoleezza Rice fell off of her treadmill when she saw that Hamas won the elections, because they thought that Abbas was going to win. And since that election, they have not allowed elections to happen again, because every time it's been clear that Hamas will win those elections again.
Yeah.
And
So
every single time in history that one of these genocidal colonial settler, these genocidal settler colonies were facing indigenous resistance, they defined it as terrorist. Every single time. The British in Ireland, the French in Algeria, the Americans in Vietnam. I mean, it's the same story everywhere. And then they end up handing over to the so-called terrorists. The same in Afghanistan. Now, Donald Trump is saying he wants Bagram Air Base built by the Soviet Union back.
And they built it.
So you know, every single time, the ANC, the African National Congress, all these countries considered it a terrorist organization. Who do they think they're fooling here? And then, Tamara, can we show the tweet from Benjamin Netanyahu? His response, it's just part of it, but his response to this recognition, so-called recognition. That's the one where he says, let me just find it in my notes. Sorry, I'm a little discombobulated.
He's like being very paternalistic.
Yeah, here it is.
Like, just wait till your father gets home, sort of thing.
Yeah, so Netanyahu says, the response to the latest attempt to force upon us a terror state in the heart of our land will be given after my return from the United States. Stand by. What is that response going to be? That's a clear threat. We know what Israel does to Palestinians. It mass murders them. So it's going to include more land theft, more demolition of homes in the West Bank, more expulsions, more killings, more crimes, more vengeance, which will be meted out against the Palestinian people.
Yeah.
And I ask you this, Will France, will Canada, will Australia, will Portugal, will Malta, will all the other countries joining this circus do anything to prevent that or to punish Israel for it? You
No,
bet
they'll,
they won't. And they
yeah.
will have brought more vengeance and disaster on the heads of the Palestinian people. And it's important to say this because there are people, we just heard Ahmed Abu-Taymi in that incredible interview earlier in the show, talking about how Palestinians tried everything, including the 2018 Great March of Return, a non-violent mass movement to assert their rights, not their aspirations, their rights. And Israel murdered hundreds of people, maimed thousands of people. And so are we going to say, oh, well, Palestinians brought it on themselves for going out and marching peacefully? That's why Palestinians did the October 7th resistance operation, because it was the only option to exercise their internationally recognized right to resist against a colonial occupation, a military occupation, which has last summer been declared by the International Court of Justice finally to be inherently illegal in itself. And so they had the right to do that. Nobody can ever say, as all of these do, all of these countries hint at, that Hamas brought disaster on the Palestinian people, or the resistance, because the resistance isn't, we mustn't equate it only with Hamas. The resistance is wider than that. So let me rephrase that the resistance brought disaster on the Palestinian people by the October 7th operation, and they're to blame for it. And Mahmoud Abbas, the quisling collaborator, traitor in the West Bank, says it too, that the resistance brought disaster on the Palestinian people. Well, I'm telling you now, their so-called peaceful, diplomatic, aspirational momentum, circling back to the whiteboarding and brainstorming idea of a two-state solution, or whatever other colonial corporate garbage speak they want to add to this, that will bring disaster to the Palestinian people. It will bring more Israeli vengeance, more Israeli destruction, and none of them will lift a finger to stop it.
No, they'll
We
just, issue another condemnation or a statement, and with the other hand, they'll keep sending weapons and sign arms deals and
Keir Starmer's spy planes are still flying
yes,
over Gaza to help direct the genocide forces of Israel.
that's right.
we have the Mahmoud Abbas clip, I think, that we can show. I just want to make the quick point first that at least, I mean, Mahmoud Abbas, as you mentioned, Mahmoud Abbas was actually elected the president, the so-called president of the Palestinian Authority 20 years ago. 20 years ago. This is how long this guy's been in place. It's completely undemocratic. There was then legislative elections to the Palestinian Authority the following year, which Hamas won. And as John said, they haven't allowed elections to take place ever since. But at least, at very minimum, 81% of Palestinians want Mahmoud Abbas to step down. He's incredibly unpopular, and these are polls of the West Bank and Gaza Strip only, which to be honest, I question the reliability of. But even those polls show that of the vast majority of Palestinians in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip want him to step down. So this is someone who is not by any stretch of the imagination popular amongst Palestinians, and yet of course these so-called world leaders like Albanese are just fawning over the guy as if he's got some sort of democratic legitimacy, when the complete opposite is true. And this is the guy who they're fawning over at the UN, and just condemned everything, condemned resistance at the UN.
Can we show the pictures of what's happening at the so-called Palestinian embassy in? Oh yeah, you've got the Abbas clip. Let's do that first. You wanted to show that, Asa.
Despite all what our people have suffered, we reject what Hamas carried out on the 7th of October. These actions that targeted Israeli civilians and took them hostages, because these actions do not represent the Palestinian people, nor do they represent their just struggle for freedom and independence. We have affirmed, and we will continue to affirm, that the Gaza Strip is an integral part of the state of Palestine, and that we are ready to bear full responsibility for governance and security there. Hamas will not have a role to play in governance. Hamas and other factions will have to hand over their weapons to the Palestinian National Authority as part of a process to build the institutions of...
Yeah,
Amazing.
this is what a Palestinian Zionist looks and sounds like.
Yeah, it was
And
written.
this
That speech
Palestinian
was written
Zionist,
by Huckabee, probably.
well, this
Yeah.
Palestinian Zionist Mahmoud Abbas wasn't even allowed to go to New York to deliver this prostration and this boot licking and foot kissing of Israel and the Zionists. He had to do it by Zoom. He had to do it by Zoom because they wouldn't let him in. This is what collaboration and treachery gets you. Your masters spit on you and humiliate you, and the more you prostrate yourself before them, they spit on you and humiliate you even more. Let's go, if we can, unless someone else wants to say something about Mahmoud Abbas. But yeah, this is so
this was the role of the Palestinian Authority in London. The Palestinian Authority representative in London for several years now has been 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐿, and their office in London was, after Keir Starmer's announcement, was upgraded from what was called a mission to what's now called an embassy. And they had this sort of ceremony of replacing the sign outside the embassy, boasting that it's now the embassy of the state of Palestine.
Yeah,
and
I want to say something
yeah.
about that, Asa. They did change the sign from, mission of the Palestinian Authority or whatever to embassy of the state of Palestine. And someone on X, on Twitter, recalled a Palestinian saying, and I asked my dad about it too, and he confirmed it, that they say it in his village, and it goes like this: بس ضايل 3 حدوات وفرس وبصير خيال. And let me translate that it's a funny story or a saying about a man is going down the road and he finds a horseshoe and he picks it up and he runs back to his village and he shows everyone, look what I found a horseshoe. Now all I need is 3 more horseshoes and a horse and I'll be a horseman. That's what this is.
Yeah, seems apt. Well, I mean, you could see British viewers, especially from this photo, will probably recognise that the ceremony was attended by a who's who of Labour government cronies, not even the top level cronies, it has to be said, but attendees included the Middle East Minister Hamish Falconer, and in this tweet, the Health Minister Wes Streeting, who posted this sort of selfie with 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐿. Streeting is a hard right Blairite in the Labour Party, and he's often viewed as a likely successor to Starmer as Prime Minister, and he's been listed by Labour Friends of Israel as one of its supporters. And at the beginning of the genocide, all these people were lining up to say that they opposed a ceasefire, very early on, and all these kind of disgusting things.
Look
that
how
they were
happy
saying.
they are.
Yeah.
Well,
So proud of
all the
themselves.
most bitter enemies of the
Yeah.
Palestinian people,
Labour enemies of
undying
Palestine.
supporters
Yeah.
of this genocide are supporting this and celebrating it.
Yeah, and they see it as a way to kind of. As you said, not
Change
everyone
the
in this
subject,
photo is.
Nathan, right.
Sorry?
Isn't it? It's to change the subject from something.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's to change the subject, and they see it as a way to kind of cover up for their sins at the beginning of the genocide, where they was just openly supporting Israel, and the government is still openly supporting Israel, but now they're able to say to their constituent, well, we recognize the state of Palestine is something that they can say, and they can kind of fool people onto sort of just change the subject, as you said, which you've made the point, Ali, that what they really should have been talking about at the UN is this commission of inquiry.
Which I think we can show, just to remind people that just, I think, less than 2 weeks ago, the independent UN Commission of Inquiry, this is an independent, these aren't people who aren't answerable to America's poodle and Israel's poodle, Antonio Guterres. These are independent international figures, and they concluded that Israel is, in fact, committing genocide in Gaza. And imagine if an independent commission had concluded that Russia is committing genocide in Ukraine, for example. What would Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron, all those clowns, be talking about now? Nobody's mentioning this. And remember, as Craig Mochaiber reminded us just a couple of weeks ago when we had him on this live stream, that I think it's today, I have to check the date, but it was last September, I think 24th or 25th, that the UN General Assembly passed that resolution giving Israel a deadline of 12 months to stop, to end its occupation, to withdraw completely from occupied Palestinian territories. And nobody is talking about that.
No.
The only discussion at the UN should be, what sanctions are we going to impose? Not even Mahmoud Abbas talked about that, because he was told, you'll get your little fake recognition if you shut up about any accountability. Don't you dare bring up accountability, because that's not how the game is played. And let's look. You marked this for us, Asa. Antonio Guterres's tweet about this. This was just yesterday or 2 days ago, I think. He says, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is morally, legally, and politically intolerable. The nightmare must stop. Today, I called on world leaders to do all they can to ensure the two-state solution prevails for the people of Israel, Palestine, and all humanity. What is going on here?
I mean, it's as if someone had said during the end of the Second World War that the Nazi Jewish conflict was morally, legally, and politically intolerable.
Or the black-white conflict in South Africa during apartheid, which is in fact what the Western liberal press did do during apartheid. They did try to present that atrocious, racist, white supremacist regime that murdered and oppressed people in South Africa just for being indigenous black people in South Africa. They called it a conflict, and they called it complicated, and they called it nuanced, and they called it all the things they claim this genocide is. And it is absolutely outrageous. What Antonio Guterres had no excuse not to call this a genocide over the last 2 years, but not to use that word after the independent UN Commission of Inquiry concluded this genocide is absolutely outrageous. And he doesn't mention the genocide. He doesn't mention stopping the genocide. He doesn't mention accountability. He equates the victims of genocide with the perpetrators. This is Ahmed Abu-Tema said it. Ahmed Abu-Tema said that this international system has completely failed and has to be replaced by something else. And nobody should celebrate this. We should condemn it. We should condemn these fake recognitions. We should condemn the continued use of the two-state fantasy to distract from the genocide that all these countries are helping Israel to perpetrate. And the sole focus should be on accountability and pressure to stop this genocide and bring all those who are responsible for it to justice.
Including those states that have been enabling and cheerleading this genocide.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm a bit passionate about this. But just watching it over the last
It's
period, it's disgusting.
no, it makes you
It's
insane.
disgusting when
Yeah.
you see what
Yeah.
they're doing in Gaza. When you
Yeah,
look at what Ahmed talked about and what Nora reported on at the beginning of this program, as she has every week over the last 720 days, and none of them are talking about it.
yeah, and there's people of goodwill who don't really understand. I'm talking about in solidarity movements especially in the UK, who don't really understand the true role of the Palestinian Authority. Like Hossam Zomlot, for example, regularly leads Palestine solidarity demonstrations in London, or at least turns up to them. And people don't really understand that.
Hussam Zomlot distributed sweets. We just heard Ahmed Abu-Tayma telling us that a cup of coffee was a dream in Gaza, that he couldn't go and get food because he didn't have energy to go and get food. And Hussam Zomlot and the so-called embassy of the so-called state of Palestine that exists only in their imagination was distributing sweets publicly.
Yeah, I mean, that really says it all. They are during the solidarity movement for South Africa, during the anti-apartheid movement, there was no part of the solidarity movement which supported the Bantustans, these fake states that the white supremacist regime set up as so-called homelands for what they called the Bantu people. Nobody recognized them, but unfortunately, people in solidarity movements in the West do recognize the Palestinian Authority, and I think there's a problem.
It is. There are just one or two things that we should also talk about as this farce, as this circus around so-called recognition of a so-called state carries on. Spain, meanwhile, announced that it was sending a naval ship to accompany or protect or something the flotilla, the Gaza Sumud flotilla that I think there's about 50 boats that have been leaving kind of in successive waves from Southern Europe. The Spanish government said that they are sending a Navy boat. The Italian government is now sending 2 Navy boats. This is after the entire country was shut down by students and activists and union members and school teachers and municipal workers the other day. And then there was this fiery speech by Colombia's Gustavo Petro yesterday at the UN General Assembly. Ali, what can you say about these international developments?
Well, the flotilla is one of the things that gives us and gives people in Gaza a lot of hope. People in Gaza are saying we're waiting for the flotilla. We want it to break the siege. And it's clearly a bit more of a challenge for Israel because of the sheer number of boats this time and the amount of global popular support that we're seeing for it, and the fact that many prominent international figures are on it. And Israel has been issuing direct threats to it. They've labeled it a Hamas flotilla, which is a very serious, that isn't just their usual cheap propaganda. That's laying a ground potentially to attack it, which is exactly what Israel did against the flotilla in 2010, which included several boats, the largest of which was the Mavi Marmara, which Israel attacked and murdered 10 people on that ship and kidnapped everyone on board, and they injured many other people. So it's clearly laying the ground for a potential military attack against this civilian humanitarian flotilla. And why wouldn't Israel do it? Because nobody's ever stopped them in the past and they've never faced consequences. But the announcement by Pedro Sanchez, the Prime Minister of Spain, of sending a warship is I think, a significant departure. Because remember, we've said before that all these EU countries, they sent boats to protect, they sent their navies to protect shipping to Israel in the Red Sea, so that, or through the Red Sea to break the Yemeni blockade, which is designed to stop the genocide, but they never sent a ship to protect a humanitarian flotilla to Gaza. So what Pedro Sanchez said in his statement is that the government of Spain demands that international law be complied with and that the right of its citizens to navigate the Mediterranean under safe conditions be respected. Tomorrow, a maritime action vessel, I think it's a naval vessel, equipped with all necessary means, will set sail from Cartagena in case it is necessary to assist the flotilla and carry out any rescue. Now, people have pointed out that that wording is somewhat loopholey.
Yeah.
Carry out a rescue, doesn't suggest that it suggests they're going to wait until Israel attacks it and see what they can do to help. But nonetheless, it does make it much harder for Israel to carry out a military attack if warships of allied countries are sailing along with it in order to protect at least their citizens who are on these boats, because there are citizens from all over Europe and the world. And indeed, it's been reported, although not announced quite so prominently, that Italy is sending a ship as well. I think that was confirmed by the defense minister in Italy, whereas this announcement was made by the Prime Minister of Spain himself, Pedro Sanchez, at a podium in New York at the United Nations. So this is quite a significant departure. And why not do it? I mean, why isn't Turkey, which has a very large navy, sending its navy and placing Israel before a choice? Either this flotilla goes through and it breaks the siege, or you attack the navies of Turkey, Spain, Italy, and whoever else, a coalition of the willing, let's call it. And that's the least that they should be doing. And again, reminding ourselves of what 𝐄𝐥𝐿 𝐈𝐧𝐭𝐫𝐶𝐚 tells us time and again, that the Genocide Convention, to which all these countries are signatories, gives them the legal authority, indeed the obligation to do this. The Article 1 of the convention is that the signatories undertake to prevent and to punish the crime of genocide. So and it doesn't limit the action that they're allowed to take. So I hope that Spain, this is symbolic and it's important in that sense. Here's me supporting symbolism for once. People are always telling me, Ali, accept something. Okay, I'm accepting the symbolism of Spain finally breaking and Italy finally breaking with the, Israel can never be challenged consensus. But it has to be more than symbolism.
Yeah.
But this, I'll say this is a start. If other countries follow and Spain holds its ground, it's certainly unprecedented. We can say that.
Well, the ships are supposed to land in Gaza in the next few days, so we're going to be watching that very closely.